Hi, this is Zach with Worn&Wound. Today I'll be taking a look at the Mido Commander 2. Mido is a Swatch Group brand along with Hamilton, Tissot, and Longines, and several others, but it's one that you might not be quite as aware of in the US because it was a brand that was really focused on South American and Chinese market for a long time. Now they are bringing it over to the US, establishing it here, which is very exciting because it's another kind of very value-driven brand. I mean, really priced along the lines of Hamilton and Tissot, but they offer a different aesthetic, a different style. And what I really like about them is that they offer more casual and kind of dress watches. I personally find that in the kind of more affordable price point, under $1,000 in particular, there's really kind of a dearth of dress and just casual watches. There's a lot of dive watches, pilot watches, sport watches, etc. No new ones come out every day, but good, solid, kind of business casual watches, not too formal either, but not too casual, not something that you'd have to really be concerned, like you could absolutely wear with a suit if you felt like it, just good, versatile, everyday, casual dress watches. They're just not that available, and really, for the most part, dress watches tend to cost a lot more. So having a new selection of them to purchase, to play with, etc., is just very exciting. So here you have the Commander 2. The Commander 2 is, as the name might indicate, based on the Commander 1, which is still available from Mido. And it is a watch that looks like it's straight out of the 1950s. This version, the Commander 2, is an updated modern version of that. So it's a little bit bigger. This one is 40 millimeters versus 37 millimeters, and it has kind of updates to the branding and the typeface. So it's just a little bit more of a modern, masculine watch, makes it a little bit more towards that casual side of the kind of business casual. But it is nevertheless a very attractive, very versatile watch that is, definitely great for kind of the business, office environment. This is an automatic and powered by Mido's Caliber 80 movement, which features an 80-hour power reserve, has a nice big domed sapphire crystal, and a retail price of $920. So let's take a closer look. The Commander 2 actually comes in several different styles, and the case itself actually comes in two different styles. So you can get it with a lugged case with either bracelet or strap, or this integrated version. And the integrated cases are interesting. I mean, the con of them is that you have to use the strap or bracelet that comes with it because it really is part of the case. What I like about them, though, is that they give it a very kind of cohesive aesthetic. So the case literally becomes the bracelet here, and that is very attractive, makes the thing look like just a very complete idea. And I guess in some senses makes it just like a simpler watch to throw on if you're not interested in changing straps, or you just want a bracelet. You don't have to worry about it. It also makes it wear a little bit differently, and especially in terms of the size. So this watch is 40 millimeters in diameter. Now from end of the integrated end link to end link is about 45 millimeters. But because of how it looks, that this feels like a continuation of the bracelet, it really actually looks and wears more like a totally lugless design, which I like. And actually the Commander 1, when you look that up, is a 37 millimeter lugless shape as well. So it kind of pays tribute to what was there, and looks great, and it kind of wears very nicely. Looking at it from above, though, as you can see, it is basically just a cylindrical design, puts a lot of emphasis on the dial. This really is all about the dial, but the design itself does have some intriguing aesthetics and kind of design details to it. Looking at it from the side, you can really see some of the details and finishing that make the case interesting. So one of the most interesting details about it is that the sides are totally undercut with this large scalloped shape that kind of gets rid of the edge that you would normally find there. That does a couple of things. One, it makes the watch seem a little bit shorter, I think. So the watch is 11.4 millimeters in height, and that includes the domed sapphire crystal, which isn't that tall when you include the crystal in there. But by breaking up the slab side, you definitely visually make it shorter. But also by getting rid of that edge, when it's on your wrist, there's nothing really to dig in. So it just makes it kind of more comfortable, easier to wear throughout the day. And then it's aesthetically interesting. I think it's just it's a cool way for them to take a very normal kind of side and just make it a little bit more interesting. Looking at the finishing now, you have very nice light brushing going horizontally along the side among the case and as well as the bezel here. It's a nice, it's not, I am glad to see that there isn't too much polishing, which I think can almost be too much on dress watches. Here, that breaks it up. But then you do have the polished bevel on the bezel here, which then just adds that little bit of pop. It frames the dial nicely. And it also flows into the domed crystal, which is a detail I really like. So this crystal, it has a soft dome going over, but it also has a large chamfer on the side, which just gives it a little bit more of kind of a materiality. Like you can see that there's a piece of glass mounted to the watch, which I really like, and I think it speaks to the fact that these, the Commander 1 watches in the 50s would have had acrylic crystals on them. So this speaks to this, but it is a very modern component. While we're on the side, we should also take a quick look at the crown here. It's a small push-pull crown. It's a very normal-looking crown. It's not the most exciting thing. The only thing that's a little bit interesting, peculiar about it, I'm actually not 100% sure how I feel about it, is that it is polished as well rather than brushed, so it does stand out. It makes it look a little bit like it's apart from another watch, but it's such a subtle thing that it's really, it doesn't really bug you. Looking now at the dial of the Mido Commander 2, it's a really attractive dial, quite a nice amount of different things going on. So it has some texture, play in texture, and some three-dimensionality, and just, it feels like a very well thought out dial that definitely speaks a little bit to the vintage heritage as well as just, modern and kind of nice design into itself. So this one is all in gray tones, which I love. And it starts with this sunburst gray central area, so that gives you a nice little bit of, that kind of beam of light that you get from sunray dials. But because it's a dark gray, it isn't, too garish or anything like that. Definitely is an attractive look. And that is surrounded by a matte silver area, which is kind of part of this primary index. So you have, for the primary index, all matching applied markers. And these are actually really attractive markers when you get up close and look at them. The shape of them is like a little ramp. So they start low, they go up, they hit a crest, and then they drop back down. And the area where they drop back down, along the edge here, they are polished, so you get a little glint of light there. And then coming the other way, you have these three lines, which is actually a line of lume, and then a black line, and another line of lume. So when it glows, it actually glows with this interesting kind of two-line stripe shape. I mean, it's a very small amount of area, so it's not really bright lume, but it is cool looking nevertheless. The use of applied markers, I think smart on a watch like this obviously has that kind of dress casual vintage feel to it. And I just like how it is played here with kind of going between these two areas. So there's just kind of plays with the texture a little bit and very three-dimensional. You just get a feeling of like, that you could touch everything in here. Looking now closer on this matte silver, you have black lines for the individual second or minute. That just actually makes it, a little bit more legible, if you will. They do skip a few of them down here for Swiss made, which feels a little unnecessary to kind of, but whatever, we can let that go. It's not something that's really that distracting. Looking at the chapter ring, that's all the way around the dial now, which is a little bit obscured by the chamfer in the crystal. You have a very vintage feeling chapter ring with white dots that are bigger in intervals of 5 or at the hour, and then smaller in between. And that surface is kind of like a gunmetal gray. It has a little bit of a shine to it as well. And what's nice also is that each of those larger dots is actually lumed as well. So that gives it a little bit of a feeling of kind of the vintage tritium dot, which I love. Looking closer now at the central dial, you have quite a bit of text as well as a massive date window. So starting there, alpha of 3, you have this very large date day window, date day, as it says at 9. This could be a detail that I think could be love it or leave it for a lot of people. It is part of the Commander line. They all have date days. And I think that does obviously speak a lot to some of those vintage watches. You do see that on those kind of simple classic watches from back in the 50s, 60s that have the date day function there. It is very, it is big, it is in your face. I kind of accept it because I understand it as part of the aesthetic, and I think they balance it out, but you got to want that there. If you're a no date person, this obviously isn't going to appeal to you. Now looking, you have text around, you have Mido logo under 12. automatic, commander, and dado day, then kind of corresponding to each other, all in the same typeface, so it's nothing is too, overweighting each other. I do think it's nice that they balanced it out, so there is something in each kind of quadrant of the watch, 12, 3, 6, and 9. So, there aren't any areas that just feel too open, which I think was a smart way to balance it out. One thing I really like about the other Commander, the Commander 1, is that the Mido logo is their vintage Mido logo, which is a really cool script. I kind of wish they had kept that for this dial. Looking now at the hands, the hour and minute hands are really gorgeous. They correspond really nicely to the applied markers. They're big. They're straight sword hands. They're a little bit more like actually robust than you might imagine on a watch this style, but I think they work really well. So they consist of like a striped black around with polished surrounds. So you immediately just have a bunch of little textures going on there, and that's how it kind of corresponds to the stripe feeling of the applied markers. And then you have a line of loom. They're very noticeable, they're very legible, they have a nice masculinity to them. I think they're a really nice choice and something a little bit different than the kind of typical styles you find on watches or on vintage watches. And then the second hand here is just a tapering silver stick. So very simple there, but functional. Looking now quickly at the bracelet. So as I said before, this is an integrated bracelet watch. So the bracelet you have here is basically your choice, your only option for this. It fits this end link here, and nothing else really fit that because what you have is this kind of 10 millimeter male part. So what else is going to attach to that? There actually isn't even a spring bar there. It is a solid pin, which actually makes it pretty structurally quite strong, which is good. But looking at the bracelet, it is a 3-link bracelet, very classical. You can call it oyster style, but on a watch like this, it doesn't really apply. It's 22 millimeters at the case, but tapers down to 18 at the buckle. Has a nice light brushing to it. I think it's attractive, and I think it does work with the watch, which obviously is fortunate. Looking at the clasp now, it says Mido Commander. It is a deployant, double-sided deployant clasp, which is it's nice because you don't have like a big buckle or anything under your wrist, so that looks good. But obviously it is a challenge if you like to change your straps a lot. There is lugged version of this watch, but for what I like about this. Is just like, as I said before, it just makes it a very cohesive design. Looking at the Commander 2 on the wrist, I think it's very clear it wears very nicely on my 7-inch wrist here. Like I said before, the 40 millimeter diameter balances out really well because of the integrated case. So it really looks and feels like a 40 millimeter watch. Lugless design where the bracelet just goes directly into it. And a 40 millimeter lugless watch is going to wear smaller than a 40 millimeter lug watch. So that kind of balances it out. So it does feel sub 40, but it still has the more presence, if you will, because it is nice and big dial. Which is great. Like I said, this is a more of a modern version. I think there's obviously people are very strict about dress watches being under 38 millimeter, and this isn't a strict dress watch though. It's a dress casual watch. It's an everyday watch. It's kind of a chameleon. It's something you can wear out, normally because I think it has a nice masculine look to it. It's not too fussy, but if you put this on, with a blazer, with maybe a suit even. It's not going to look out of place at all either. Is it a Patek Calatrava? No, but I think like something like this is actually better for everyday wear. Like I'd be more down to just wear this normally and know that I don't have, that I have a nice option that can go step up to dressy, more so than, let's say, a dive watch or something like that. So, I really like that side of it. And it's just a very attractive watch. It's a nice amount of substance here, a nice amount of texture, some play and light, from the polish to the brush, to the applied markers, to the sunray, to the chamfer on the crystal. There's a lot to look at, a lot of detailing in kind of a very small area. None of it's opulent, though. None of it is tacky. None of it feels like it's, shouting for attention. It's not. It's a very tasteful watch, which I think is, ultimately the most important thing with something that you might want to wear more formally. The bracelet is very comfortable. It's thin. It doesn't feel like a sport watch. Sport bracelet stuck onto a more casual watch, so that's great. And like I said, with the gray here, I love gray as I've mentioned, but it's very versatile. So it goes with any color you're going to wear it with, and I think that's important also for kind of something that is an everyday watch. To wrap up, the Mido Commander 2 I think is a really great watch, especially kind of in the under $1,000 price category. I think the aesthetics of it are fantastic. It's very handsome. I think they did a really good job of creating a piece that speaks to kind of mid-century design, but still feels like a modern and contemporary watch. It's not just a recreation of a vintage piece for the sake of looking vintage. Instead, it pulls aesthetics from the vintage, the Commander 1, but just makes it much more contemporary. Doing so, especially with the 40 millimeter case, which adds, some masculinity to it, beefs it up a little bit. But I think it's actually a really nice size for this watch. Since it wears almost as a lugless design, it's sort of it's a little deceptive how it wears. It just feels like the right size for it. And also speaking to the integrated design, like I said, you don't have to get this with an integrated lug. They do have it with normal lugs, and there's a lot of other variations as well, including ones with chronometer ratings and various different colors of dial. I liked the way the integrated lugs work on this watch because, as I said, it has a very kind of complete aesthetic, and it's the kind of watch, speaking to versatility, you can just kind of grab any day, put it on, and it's going to work with what you're wearing or where you're going because it's neither too casual nor too formal. And yeah, speaking in just to the value, $920 for a Swiss-made watch with a Swiss-made automatic movement. Very compelling price at this point in time, and you can increase that even more so when you consider this as an 80-hour power reserve, which is very uncommon. It is pretty much exclusive to ETA brand or Swatch Group watches, namely Tissot, Hamilton, and Mido. So having 80 hours is just, it's great. It's very convenient. Take your watch off one day, pick it up 2 days later, still running. You can't argue with the convenience there. So yeah, overall, really like this watch. Very attractive. Please read the full review on Worn&Wound. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thank you.